Good morning, good afternoon, and good evening around the world. Welcome back to the channel. My name is Blackjack. As always, today I will be doing a YouTube comment section deck tech for you guys. If you're interested in having me put a deck together for you or help you tweak a current deck that you have, I'm looking for any of the following metrics: a budget, a bracket, a theme, a commander, and any pet cards you have. So leave a comment down below with any of those, and I'd be happy to put a deck together for you and make a video about it. Today, we have a submission by the user cyphs, I want to say. A buddy, friend of Chalen's, looking for a deck, has the Tidus Yuna's Guardian Precon from Final Fantasy, getting back into Magic, looking for a bracket 3, $200 to $400 budget, likes a lot of different kinds of counters, couple pet cards, Suntail Hawk, Contagion Engine, and then possibly some older level slash quest counter cards. So all I can say is I hope you have a lot of dice on hand. This is a counter-tastic deck. This is going to be counters everywhere all the time. Different kinds of counters. You're going to need those little ones that say flying and lifelink and indestructible. You're also going to need dice for +1/+1 and this and that. So make sure that you have all of the required equipment before you show up to the table to play this. But this is Tidus Yuna's Guardian, 3 mana from Final Fantasy, Bant colors, 3/3. Beginning of combat on your turn, you can move a counter from a creature you control onto a second creature you control. And then, note that says a counter. It doesn't have to be +1/+1. You can move a counter of any kind from one creature onto another. And then you can, with one or more creatures you control with counters on them, deal combat damage to a player. You may draw a card and proliferate. Do this once each turn. So I took the precon in order to stay within the budget requirements. I took the exact lands from the precon and just installed it into this deck list. I cut one land down to 36. I cut the Ash Barrens. Obviously, I saw your comment, and I know that you already have, some cards in your collection, so take whatever you have and add that to the lands and make the lands better. If you have fetches, if you have shocks, whatever. Obviously, the better lands, the more enjoyable and the more consistent your game's going to be. But for now, in order to maintain budget restriction, I decided just to keep the land base from the precon. So we're not going to really be addressing that much. That being said, we do have one Planeswalker, Elspeth Resplendent. So this can put a counter, 1/1, and then you can either choose Flying, First Strike, Lifelink, or Vigilance to put also. So a lot of counters that you're going to be able to use. Let me make this a little bit bigger for you guys. That feels pretty good. Obviously, it has other abilities as well, but more often than not, this is just going to be keyword soup, the deck. This is going to be counters, the deck, and this was the Planeswalker who interacted the most favorably with those things. Creatures, this is the big part of the deck. There's 30 in total, 31 if you include the commander. So we have Arwen. So it enters the battlefield with an indestructible counter. You can remove it. I would say more often than not, whenever we have a creature that we're going to see in this deck that says enters the battlefield with, a counter of this kind or a counter of that kind, you're going to ideally look to proliferate it and then move like one of them off. So if we can proliferate Arwen's indestructible counter so she has 2 of them, and then take one of them and give it to Auron or give it to Tidus, then obviously we have now 2 creatures that are indestructible. And then the next time we proliferate Arden's indestructible and Tidus's, and then we move those, so you're, breeding indestructible counters. Next one is RN 4 mana Vigilance. When he attacks, put a 1/1 counter on him and then exile a creature until he leaves the battlefield. So let's get to the ramp. It looks like we have a lot of 1 mana ramp in this deck. So this is actually one of the only green decks I've actually broken my own personal rule. Not rule, but my own personal guide as far as deck building when it comes to having green in your deck and building a land base. So whenever you're looking at a 3 mana commander in green, you have to consider the fact that more often than not, if your deck favorably interacts with creatures, things like Avacyn's Pilgrim, Llanowar Elves, Birds of Paradise, Delighted Halfling, these are actually going to be better for you and provide a more consistent game plan than the 3 mana options that I normally play, like Kodama's Reach and Cultivate, because being able to get Tidus out on turn 2 is exceptionally powerful. So I actually have changed the ramp a little bit here. We have Avacyn's Pilgrim, Birds of Paradise, Delighted Halfling, Llanowar Elves, Noble Hierarch, Sakura Tribe Elder, that's 6, Farseek, Nature's Lore, Rampant Growth, 3 visits, that's 10, and then Felwar Stone, Arcane Signet, Soul Rain. So we actually have a total of 13 pieces of ramp. Arcane Signet, Felwar Stone, pretty much all of the 2 mana gets a little bit worse in a deck like this. I think it still is good enough to play because we have a fairly decent amount of 4 drops. So consistently hitting at least one of these in order to go Tidus into a 4 drop a turn early is going to be amazing for us, but just something to note. Back to the deck list. Bio, I don't even know how to pronounce this. 1/3, you can tap it, add a mana. If this mana is spent to cast a creature, the creature enters with a 1/1 counter. Again, anytime we can get creatures entering with counters, it's better for us. Champion of Lambholt, always a powerhouse in a counter deck. One of the most consistent win conditions. Power less than Champion of Lambholt can't block creatures we control, and then whenever a creature enters, we put a 1/1 counter on it, so this thing can grow very quickly with proliferation and get to the point where, you know, really nothing can block because it's like a 10/10. Danny Pink, a newer card, not that newer, but it has been going up in price a lot. Creatures you control have one, whenever one or more counters are put on this creature for the first time each turn, draw a card. So this is just going to be a massive card draw engine for this deck. Denry Kiln, Editor-in-Chief, enters the battlefield with your choice of 1/1 counter, First Strike, or Vigilance. So we're going to do a pretty good job of allocating 1/1 counters. I would always recommend putting First Strike or Vigilance. Dreamtide Whale, Vanishing 2, not going to be something you're going to have to worry about because you're actually going to be proliferating the Vanishing counter to keep it around. But whenever a player casts their second spell, you proliferate. So again, you're proliferating more than just 1/1 counters. I can't stress enough, this is not a 1/1 counter deck. This is just keyword counter soup. So you're going to proliferate indestructible counters and flying counters and vigilance counters and 1/1 counters and quest counters and everything. Evolution Witness, whenever one or more 1/1 counters are put on this, return a creature from your graveyard to your hand. So this is something that's going to consistently be able to get stuff back from the graveyard for us, which is awesome. Azuri, enters the battlefield, pay 3, proliferate twice. Whenever you proliferate, draw a card. Fathom Mage, evolves, draw a card. Glenham Lendra Archmage, amazing card for this deck. Flying, pay a blue, sacrifice this, counter a non-creature spell, comes back with Persist. If it comes back with Persist, that means it comes back with a -1/-1 counter. Now, if we end up giving it a +1/+1 counter, let's say with this guy, then that's actually going to cancel out the -1/-1, so it's just going to come back as a 2/2 with no counters on it again, which essentially means you can use it again to counter another spell, and then if you can always get it to come back with a +1/+1 counter, and never that persist counter. It's basically a counter spell as so often as you have blue mana, which is insane. Herald of Secret Streams, another major win con. It gives all of our 1/1 counter guys unblockable. Incubation Druid to make some mana. Lighthouse Chronologist. I looked through all of the quest cards and I looked through all of the level up cards and I picked you a couple of the best. Most of them are frankly unplayable in this day and age, unfortunately. But Lighthouse is one that I don't think a lot of people know about, and I think it's fairly strong. At the beginning of each end step, if it's not your turn, take an extra turn after this one. This is going to be leveled up fairly quickly through proliferation and your own ability to pay the mana for it. It's going to be a must remove effect. Lulu. Whenever an opponent attacks you, choose target creature attacking you, put a stun counter on it, and then it also is a proliferation machine. Luminous Broodwolf. It brings stuff back to the battlefield after it dies with a flying counter on it. Polywog Prodigy, awesome card. It evolves, and then whenever an opponent casts a non-creature spell with mana value less than his power, you draw a card. Riku, whenever one or more 1/1 counters are put on a creature, opponents cannot block, and then you can move a counter from one creature onto another. So being able to move counters around is going to be very useful for us. Slippery Bogbonder. 4 mana, flash, hexproof, comes in, puts a hexproof counter on something, and saves it. And then you can also proliferate the hexproof, and then spread it among the team to give everybody's hexproof. Summon Knights of the Round. One of the big end game pieces, the big windmill slam off the top of the deck pieces, 8 mana. You basically make an army for 4 turns, and on the 5th turn, you distribute indestructible counters to everything. Suntail Hawk, one of your personal pet cards. Its eyes, its eye, the glaring sun. Its cry, the keen wind. Huh. Tecuthal. So if you'd proliferate twice instead, and then you can also pay some mana to put an indestructible counter on it. Waka deals combat damage, destroy an artifact, put a 1/1 counter on it, and then you get to distribute 1/1 counters as well. Finally, Yuna Grand Summoner. Add a mana, creatures enter with a 1/1. If a creature's put into a graveyard, you can move the 1/1s. So just super synergistic. All these cards work well together. All these cards make each other stronger. That's why there's not a ton of 6, 7, 8 mana 6/6s, 7/7s, 8/8s that just windmill slam win the game. You really don't need that in a deck like this. So many of your little creatures are going to build up over time and get strong enough where they're going to be able to take players out of the game. The important part is obviously not only keeping your creatures alive with hexproof and indestructible counters, but then we're also, I'm actually going to skip sorceries, we're going to go to instants. We do play a lot of effects that keeps our board safe. So this is one of those decks where you cannot hold cards in your hand and play a slow game. The more cards you have out, the more synergistic and the more counters that you're going to be providing your team. So it's important that you actually play into the field as often as you can and as heavy as you can. Therefore, we play a lot of ways to protect our team. We have Clever Concealment to phase stuff out, Contractual Safeguard to distribute a shield counter, Inspiring Call to give everything a 1/1 counter indestructible and draw, Mutational Advantage to spread hexproof and indestructible, Protection Magic for some shield counters, and then Ripples of Potential to proliferate and then phase stuff out. So again, you're going to hold these cards in your hand as ways to protect from board wipes. That's the only thing you're worried about in a deck like this. As far as sorceries, we do have a couple of our own that actually interact favorably. Damning Verdict, destroy all creatures with no counters on them. And then Wave Goodbye, I love the name of this card. Return each creature to their owner's hands without a 1/1 counter on it. So 2 mass board wipe, mass removal, that's not going to affect us in any way. Swords to Plowshares is the last instant. Obvious why it's here. It goes everywhere. Artifacts. Agatha's Soul Cauldron. I'm not going to take the time to read this card out loud, but what I can say is it's confusing, it's interactive, and it's interesting. So, best of luck in figuring out what to do with it. Contagion Engine, one of the cards you asked for. I probably would have put it in here anyway. It's a great card that is a proliferation machine as well as a small board removal. And then we have Ozolith and Ozolith the Shattered Spire. So both ways to add counters and then either continue to add counters or move counters around. We have Sword of Truth and Justice, the only sword in the deck. It proliferates and it adds counters, so it felt pretty obvious to put it in here. Finally, we have a bit of an enchantment section. Bred for the Hunt is card draw. Communal Brewing is we're going to basically always put ingredient counters for everybody, so stuff enters with a bunch of extra counters on it. Family's Favor is going to distribute shield counters. Felidar Retreat can put 1/1 counters on creatures. Guardian Project's great card draw, especially since we're playing 30 creatures. Hardened Scales is another double counter effect. Innkeeper Talent is interacts favorably with counters, and then once you get it to level 3, it actually doubles. Quest for Renewal. I looked through all the quest cards. This is the only one I found that was playable in my mind, but it is a good one. So it basically is a Seedborn Muse on a stick. Eventually, once you get enough counters on it, you just get to untap your creatures. Resourceful Defenses. So this is again allows you to move counters around, and then when if a creature leaves the battlefield, they're a permanent. If it had counters on it, you can move those as well. Sphere Grid. Whenever a creature you control deals combat damage to a player, put a 1/1 counter, and then creatures with 1/1 counters have Reach and Trample. Finally, Tribute to the World Tree. When a creature enters, if its power is 3 or greater, draw a card. Otherwise, give it 2 1/1 counters. This deck is awesome. To be honest, the only reason I haven't built a deck like this myself is I just feel like interacting with all those 1/1 counters and those lifelinks and indestructibles and vigilance, it's a lot, to be honest. You're going to have to really be on your game to play a deck like this. But I think it turned out amazing for your bracket, for your budget. I think it's going to be awesome. And as far as upgrading pieces, because we did want to stick to that $400 budget, obviously there's no game changers, so I would consider this to be a bracket 2 to bracket 3 level deck. If you do have any game changers in your collection that you'd like to add, pick out some cards that you don't like so much, throw those in, and start tuning it to a higher bracket 3. I think you're going to have a fantastic time. Thank you so much for watching. Let me know how the deck goes, and as always, Godspeed.